Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir, and as always, my colleague Nivedna Prabhu. We're coming to you live from our Delhi studios, and tonight the big focus on the show, well, the Prime Minister is in Japan on a two-day visit. This marks the Prime Minister's 8th visit to the country. In fact, on his first day, the Prime Minister met his Japanese counterpart Shigeru Ishiba and addressed the India-Japan Joint Economic Forum. He also participated in the 15th India-Japan Annual Summit. In fact, one of the economic outcomes was the commitment that was made by Japan to invest $10 trillion Japanese yen, I beg your pardon, in India over the next 10 years. And that's significant, Nivedna, given the kind of global disruptions that we're seeing.
Absolutely, Sumita. In fact, calling India the most promising destination, Prime Minister Modi said that Japanese companies have invested USD 13 billion in India in just the last 2 years. And Prime Minister Modi stressed that Japan has always been an important partner in India's Vikas Yatra. But what exactly did the Prime Minister say? Let's listen in.
हमने अगले दशक के लिए एक रोड मैप बनाया है। हमारे विजन के केंद्र में इन्वेस्टमेंट, इनोवेशन, इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी, एनवायरनमेंट, टेक्नोलॉजी, हेल्थ, मोबिलिटी, पीपल टू पीपल एक्सचेंजेस एंड स्टेट प्रीफेक्चर पार्टनरशिप, ये प्रमुख बातें हैं। हमने अगले 10 वर्षों में जापान से भारत में 10 ट्रिलियन येन निवेश का लक्ष्य निर्धारित किया है। भारत और जापान के स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस और स्टार्टअप्स को जोड़ने पर विशेष बल दिया जाएगा। हमने ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस पर बल दिया है। बिजनेस के लिए सिंगल डिजिटल विंडो अप्रूवल की व्यवस्था की है। हमने 45,000 कंप्लायंसेस रेशनलाइज किए हैं। इस प्रक्रिया को गति देने के लिए डीरेगुलेशन पर एक उच्च स्तरीय कमेटी बनाई गई है। अब हम न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी सेक्टर को भी खोल रहे हैं। S&P ग्लोबल ने 2 दशक बाद भारत के क्रेडिट रेटिंग अपग्रेड किए हैं। The world is not just watching India. It is counting on India.
Well, that's an excerpt of the Prime Minister's address in Japan, where he was, of course, stating the fact that the world is counting on India, and he is focusing on how Indian companies can not just make in India, but make for the world, essentially. But that's not all, viewers, because the Prime Minister also speak to a Chinese publication on India-China ties, given the fact that the Prime Minister is all set to head to SCO summit, where he will be holding a bilateral with President Xi. But let's understand and see what the Prime Minister said to that Chinese publication. He said that stable, predictable and amicable bilateral relations between India and China, as two neighbors and two largest nations of the world, can have a positive impact on regional and global peace and prosperity. Now, he also stated that this is also crucial for a multipolar Asia and multipolar world, given the current volatility in the world economy. It's also important for India and China, as the two major economies, to work together, and not just to work together, but in global disruptions. And to discuss some of those developments that are currently underway in Japan, we're now joined by a very special panel of guests. Joining us live on this program is Professor P. Stobdan, former Indian diplomat, and also Mr. Rudra Pandey, international trade and commerce expert. He's also a partner at Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Lots of very important messaging that's coming in from Japan by the Prime Minister, by Prime Minister Ishiba and Prime Minister Modi as well. But let's focus on the message messaging that essentially goes out to say that Japan is a trusted and valued friend of India amidst the overhang of tariffs globally. But the economic outcomes, Rudra, if you focus on, Japan has committed 10 trillion yen along with an 8-pillar cooperation. Are these big enough breakthroughs that both India and Japan can look forward to?
Thank you, Sumita, for having me. Indeed, honestly speaking, there's a lot of opportunities lies ahead for Japanese company in India. What we are talking is 10 trillion yen, which is equivalent to close to about 67, 68 billion dollars in the next 10 years. India need that capital. Now, if you look at the current trend, most of the big Japanese companies, they have already invested in India. From manufacturing to real estate to logistics to renewable energy, etc. What is the missing part is the SME, and if you look at the Prime Minister focused, and he's talking about specific dialogue and engagement with the SMEs from Japan to India. I mean, if that comes, I think we will exceed this 67 billion to maybe $100 billion in the next 10 years.
Fair enough, Rudra. In fact, as you're looking at that roadmap as well, and I'll come back to you. In fact, both of us will come back to you to get a sense of how else you're looking at everything else that was said during this meet. But Professor, thank you also very much for taking the time out and joining us. Let's begin with how are you looking at the strategic roadmap with the new security framework as well? And while you're reading into that, what shifts does this suggest in the architecture of the region as well?
Yeah, the politically main shift in approach, in India's approach, is that we have alternative. We are going to reorient ourselves to Asia now. You know, the way the Western world has treated us in the last 1 month is not acceptable. Therefore, we look for alternatives. So all these investment, technologies, renewable energy, whatever that, in the basket of our cooperation, security cooperation, comes in a political message to show that we have an option to reorient ourselves with Asia, which is not only desirable, but also it was long overdue. Since the 40s, we have not focused on Asia. So the idea is that it's not just China, but it's also Japan that we focus on to balance the Asia approach. So it's a very important diplomatically. It's the symbolic shift that is going to start. The details will unroll in due course of time.
Right, Professor, very important point that you have made indeed about the integration of India with the rest of South Asia. But let me go back to, the economic outcomes that were announced by the Foreign Secretary in a briefing held just a short while back. Rudra, now these economic announcements are also big optics for US and definitely for China as well, especially as far as the semiconductor and rare earth material space is concerned. How much will these announcements really lead to offsetting economic vulnerabilities of India with respect to China, given the fact that we've seen export curbs which have been imposed by China?
I think that will make a balance. In fact, going back to the Japan announcement, both India and Japan, they have agreed to cooperate into these specific minerals and jointly work, not only in India, maybe in Africa and also into GCC countries. So that will also bring the opportunity where there's a gap as of now. Now, in the context of China, I think the purpose of this realignment, I'll call it, I think is to go beyond these strategic tie-up into mineral sector where India is not able to receive those critical minerals and the supplies. And I think that will be the first mover as part of this dialogue that is going to happen between tomorrow and day after. So I think in terms of the bringing in the economic balance, India is going to definitely export to Japan and also possibly to some cooperation with China will bring this balance and offset some of the deficit of the export to US, to my mind.
Right, Rudra. In fact, as you point that out and taking a cue from what you also put into context and with what Sumita also put forth. Professor, taking a cue from what even Rudra left at, because cybersecurity, critical minerals and cooperation have now, of course, entered this bilateral vocabulary, but does that represent a quite reordering of these ties to bring in that economic balance?
No, the supply of minerals and other things are not the basic issue between India and China. The restrictions have been imposed by China, and we have also prevented Chinese coming into India. That's a different issue. But the issue is between India and China is about trust, this strategic intention against each other. That's why I think you have to start with a new frame. It's not just looking for managing the relationship. I think Prime Minister is looking for a solution to the problem. And to have a solution to the India-China problem, including the border one, you require trust and a lot of confidence. So I think this visit is going to set the agenda for a definitive change, a turning point in India-China relationship, not just simply on the transactional issues, but the basic issue of India-China relation, which last 30, 40, 50 years has been eroding one after another. We have no one China policy any longer. So during Wang Yi's visit to India, he was trying to focus and even suggested that India recognized Taiwan as a part of India. So what they are looking for is to have a basic shift in our strategic approach. Otherwise, I think this will not last. This will not last even for 2 years, knowing the Chinese, expansionist designs. Anything can happen in the next 2-3 years. I mean, I'm right now sitting in Leh, in Ladakh. From Galwan, they have moved to about 300, 400 kilometers away. Now the military says they can come back in 3 hours. Such a thing happens, all these things gone to the, down the drain. So similarly, India also have certain position on China, which the Chinese are not comfortable with. Even if we resolve the border problem, we have many other issues on which...
India has not retreated from its position.
No, India is not
right, Professor,
Chinese,
but India has not really retreated from its position, whether it's on Taiwan or whether the border issue that India and China have faced. But on the other hand, if you see, China has said that it wants to expand collaboration and cooperation with China. Just hear me out and then you can respond. But my question essentially is, can India trust China? Because on the economic front, we are seeing China, putting in export curbs. And of course, there are other kinds of curbs as well. There was a story about recalling of Chinese engineers from Foxconn's factories back to China as well. So China, if you're talking about the trust issue, it is China that really needs to deliver on that.
Now, if you read the Chinese message, it's India which has prevented the Chinese companies since 2020, since the Galwan days. Now,
sir, I'm not talking about messaging. I'm not talking about messaging. You just see what's happening. You see the facts. You don't go into what the messaging is coming out from China or from India, but you see what has happened on the ground.
So the mistrust will remain. So mistrust will remain irrespective of what Prime Minister Modi does in Peking will be fruitless now. So if you don't develop the trust and the mistrust is continued, then the problem will remain. It's a very fragile effort and nothing will come out of it. Maybe in 2-3 years, things will go back to square one.
Right.
So, Sumita,
right.
if I can
in fact,
add...
let me get in a word from Rudra as well. Yes, please.
So, Sumita, I look at these two visits of our Prime Minister Modi very differently. I look at specifically in the context of Japan, very promising. They have expanded the sectors. They have also expanded the overall cooperation, not only to India, but also to Africa and also to UAE and GCC countries. They have agreed to cooperate and also work in the space of, nuclear power, and also sectors such as semiconductor, which is a very promising sector. What Mr. Modi said, that we need to go beyond automobile to batteries and to semiconductors, robotics, and also to shipbuilding, nuclear energy. And what is more important, that what he's emphasizing upon with Japan, that with Japan technology and India's talent, both can be of course, both of us are working on the strategic partnership, but also as a smart partnership. So this is going to be a long way. Those hiccups that SME had for India will come in bulk because their profitability in China has gone down. So we see greater opportunities for India for greater cooperation with the Japanese company. At the same time, in the context of China, I think as news reports suggests, and also what we understand from the ministry, there's going to be a liberalization, some leeway to press note 3 restrictions, which basically require approval of any Chinese investments into India, either directly or indirectly, and what they're calling non-strategic, non-sensitive sectors. So, and what is the focus for us is manufacturing sector. As Mr. Modi already talked about, make in India, make for the world. That's a slogan he's been using even in Japan in the recent trip. I think that is the focus for India. What we need from China is a technology, or also in the semiconductor space, we need technology cooperation. In fact, some of the Japanese companies who are operating in Japan, they are somehow have cooperation, and there are indirect ownership of Chinese entity. So there will be cooperation in that space. The government is keen to approve.
Right.
They are already approving those investments in India. So I see a greater opportunity, honestly speaking.
Rudra, in fact, as you pointed out, can I ask certainty to accelerate commitments now, or will capital remain cautious until the contours of India's engagement with China?
No, I
How do you
think
read into that?
no, I see very positive, and I must tell you that in terms of if you look at the JETRO survey suggests that 80% of the Japanese company operating in India are looking for expansion only in India. JEBIC reports suggest that most of the Japanese company operating abroad, they are looking India to be the promising country. 75% of the Japanese company operating in India are profitable. So that's a big statement, honestly speaking. That is on the statement side. On the factual point, I can tell you that more and more Japanese companies are expanding, and I'll give you two or three biggest examples in terms of the construction and development sector. You look at like Mitsui Fudosan, Sumitomo Fudosan, Mitsubishi State. They are the best developers of Japan. They're all in India as of now, as we speak. In terms of the logistics sector, Mitsui, OSK Lines, Nippon Express, most of the big companies from Japan, they're expanding their businesses. They are doing a lot of acquisitions in India. And the biggest sector is again your renewable energy. You look at all companies, be it Mitsui and Company, Marubeni, or for that matter, Osaka Gas, Shizuoka Gas. There are several Japanese companies that are expanding their footprint in India. Not only that, you have also Japanese companies importing this green energy from India, like IHI
Right.
Corporation. They have done a collaboration with IECME to import green hydrogen from India to Japan to
Right.
decarbonize and to achieve their goals. And I'll also give you one more dimension. Not
Right.
only that Japanese company are investing in India, there are Indian companies going to Japan now. Today we announced a deal. Motherson Sumi has acquired a listed company, going to acquire a listed company in Japan. So we see this commitment actually being achieved. What in 2022, 5 trillion yen investment has already been more or less achieved in this 2025. So 100% this will be achieved.
Absolutely, Rudra. And after that 5 trillion, that 10 trillion yen worth of investment that is being pledged, we'll have to see how private companies from Japan will come to invest in India. We did hear just a couple of days back that Suzuki has announced its Vitara to be exported to at least 100 countries. In fact, it is manufacturing in India. So definitely, that's a big one that's coming in from a Japanese company that's essentially based in India. We'll have to see that how this cooperation gets expanded further. But let me come to you, Professor. Now, these are very, very crucial optics that we saw. The Prime Minister meeting Shigeru Ishiba, and then he moves on to China, where he meets with President Xi and President Putin as well. All of these optics, are these too concerning for Trump?
It's not about India-Japan economic relationship. That we have been talking even before what Trump has done to us. Japan is a very important country. We have a good relationship with. So these are not the issues. The issue is in the light of what Trump has done now, in the current circumstances, the relationship between India and Japan has a new context. Whether it's about transfer of technology, whatever it is, it's symbolically very important in the present context. Why Prime Minister visited Tokyo now? And secondly, the messaging that in China I see is that, the SCO for which Prime Minister is going for the summit is going to have a collective action against what Trump is doing. All that noise we are hearing in the newspaper elsewhere, that's really damaging to India. I think the way Trump has damaged us in the last 1 month is more serious than what the Chinese have harmed us at the border.
Right.
So it is in that context, I think the Prime Minister visit to Tianjin is critical in sending a
Professor.
message to the United States.
Absolutely. That particular messaging and what we're looking at in terms of those optics, but I'm afraid we'd have to interject you there because we're running short of time. But Rudra, as well as Professor, thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here at this